Marzulli is the best-selling author of the Nephilim trilogy. He received an honorary doctorate for his work on the Nephilim. His latest non-fiction book, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, The Coming Great Deception of the Luciferian Endgame, may connect some dots other authors have overlooked. He possesses an in-depth knowledge of the UFOs and other supernatural phenomena. So everybody please welcome with me tonight, L.A. Marzulli. Good evening.
Good evening. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It is our pleasure, definitely. Interesting topic tonight. I guess we could start out. You can tell us a little bit about your books and where everybody can get them, and throw your website out there.
Well, the best place is the website, lamarzulli.net. lamarzulli.net. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on the website, and that's the best place to check it out. I also blog 6 days a week at lamarzulli.wordpress.com.
Okay, great. So tell me, L.A., how did you get started in the whole alien topic and biblical prophecy?
Well, about 20 years ago, around that time, a friend of mine asked me a question. He said, what about life on other planets? And I had no answer for him. So I went down to the bookstore and I picked up a book called The Omega Conspiracy by Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. And that really serves as the primer for me. That opened up all sorts of vistas, untapped areas I had never studied before. For instance, the Book of Enoch. Dr. Thomas drew from the Book of Enoch and other ancient texts that most people have never read. The Book of Enoch is interesting because it's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's quoted in the Christian Bible in the Book of Jude, 2 Peter, 1 Corinthians alludes to it. So it was widely read in the first century. Again, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Ethiopian Bible has the Book of Enoch preceding Genesis in their copy. So it was widely read in antiquity, and it's a mind blower because it talks about the fallen angels coming to earth and having sex with the women. And this opens up the whole idea of fallen angels, Nephilim versus ancient aliens. In fact, I was just on the History Channel a couple of weeks back. They did they're filming the second season for the Ancient Aliens. And they filmed me for about 2 hours, specifically on the Book of Enoch, and talking about my worldview, my paradigm, what I believe, sort of looking at that, and then what they're going to do is obviously take Eric von Daniken and the ancient alien hypothesis. In other words, that simply is this, that extraterrestrials created all life on this planet, they genetically manipulated early man, started the world's earliest civilizations, created the world's religions as we know them. Our ancestors worshipped these ancient aliens as gods. Now they are back at this critical juncture in human history to act as our saviors, to usher us into this new age of enlightenment. Well, that's von Daniken's side of the aisle. I completely disagree with all of that. I think what we're looking at is more of this cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, which the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about. Basically, we're talking fallen angels. These are very, very powerful beings, incredibly powerful beings. And when they came here, they created the civilizations as in antiquity, like Baalbek, perhaps Machu Picchu, perhaps the Great Pyramid, Gilgal-Raphaim in modern Israel is still intact. All these megalithic structures throughout the planet. They downloaded knowledge that mankind did not have. Ever wonder how the Mayan calendar just, sprang into existence? Here's a group of people that didn't know the wheel. All of a sudden they have this amazing calendar. Well, here's the hypothesis, and there's only two: ancient alien, fallen angel. If fallen angel manifests and downloads this information, shows them how to do it, which is what I believe happened, all of a sudden these people have this very complex calendar, which we didn't really get till the modern era. I mean, the Julian calendar, thousands of years ago, we got the 365-day thing, but we were off. The Mayan calendar is correct, and it's 1,000 years before we, in the modern era, corrected the Julian calendar to match it. Where did this information come from? And that just opens up a whole, Pandora's box of questions. Is it ancient aliens or is it fallen angels? I hold to the fallen angel theory only because I've got all this just a vast array of information in ancient texts which talk about the unthinkable. These beings manifesting on the planet, these fallen angels coming down on Earth, manifesting on the planet, having sex with women, the offspring, the hybrid, the chimera is called a Nephilim. It's half angel, half human. And this is the reason for the flood of Noah. By the way, before we get into the flood thing, if you want to get into that, all cultures, pretty much all cultures worldwide, have a flood mythos. Every single one of them, including the Chumash Indians in California.
Okay. Now, you mentioned events to come. What kind of events would we be talking about, and would this have to do with the alien interviews, say, through prophecy?
Well, look, stuff is happening on the planet, and I guess if you work an 8-hour day and you come home and you drink a couple of beers and kick back and look at the tube and go about life that way and get all your news, or what news you do get is from the mainstream media, you're clueless. On the other hand, if you know what the prophecy says and you read these ancient texts and we begin to compare them to what is happening on the global scene, what is happening in real time right now, it is alarming. I'll just give you some examples.
Okay.
Eyjafjallajökull volcano blows in Iceland, shuts down the airspace for a week. Billions of dollars are lost. BP oil spill, may have stalled the Gulf current. 6 million fish, aquatic life washing up, just dead in the Bolivian rivers. That hit the news for about 2 or 3 days, blackout. This week, millions of fish die off in a river in Louisiana. Oil spill related? Who knows? Earthquakes, 7.2, 6.8, 6.5, 8.8 from January to the present day, almost on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I've said it myself that I have never in my life remember hearing these many these large earthquakes like this in such a short period of time.
Exactly. And the whole point is it business as usual or is it something more? Famines. Niger, over almost 17% of the population faces starvation and malnutrition. Floods. China. Pakistan. The greatest flood in the whole history of Pakistan. You don't hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. They don't talk about it. They're in it. They're in it. Haiti, the earthquake that killed 200,000 people. 200,000 people killed in the Haitian earthquake. You don't hear about that anymore. They're still picking up the aftermath. There's no infrastructure in Haiti. Nothing has changed. The place is a dead zone. Nothing is working in Haiti. Aid is trickling in, but the place is a disaster area. Do you understand what's going on here? The earthquakes continue. Russia, 500 to 600 fires burning throughout all of Russia. The greatest drought that they've had in 1,000 years, and they've kept records. It's the greatest drought in 1,000 years in Russia. I mean, is it business as usual or something more?
And I might add that you don't hear about all this on the news either.
No, you don't hear anything about this. When those fires were raging in Russia, the fires burned through the area known as Chernobyl, where the Chernobyl reactor was that leaked all the radiation, which is completely contaminated, It's a ghost town. I've seen pictures. It's a ghost town. It's creepy to look at, Chernobyl. Well, when the fires came through, now we've got radioactive material burning and being ejected into the atmosphere. The Eyjafjallajökull volcano, going back to that in Iceland, there's a twin volcano called Katla. And usually these two volcanoes blow in tandem. Historically, that's what's happened. Eyjafjallajökull blows, Katla blows shortly thereafter. Volcanologists estimate that if Katla blows, the ash cloud will be at least, and being conservative here, 10 times greater than the Ayatollah volcano. Are we looking at a nuclear winter? If the Gulf Stream has failed because of the Gulf oil spill, which many people are starting to look at and wondering whether if the Gulf Stream has stopped, it's stalled out. It's happened before. Mini ice age. California, the coldest summer on record since 1914. You know, if we took one of those things by itself, you'd shrug it off. But you look at the whole picture, some of the things that I talked about, the earthquakes, the floods, the famines, the tsunamis, the fires, just the volcanic stuff, and then the signs in the heavens, comets, unidentified flying objects all over the globe, crop circles, cattle mutilations, implants, all this stuff together. Then you look at the war, the coming war in the Middle East, and we realize that something's going to blow there. Wars and rumors of wars. All this was prophesied specifically 2,000 years ago. When you see these things, what things? Wars, rumors, and wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. You will know that it's the beginning of sorrows. That's the prophecy. Are we there? In my opinion, I'm only one guy, but I've never seen the atmosphere charged like this ever, with just catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe. Week after week, we see these things manifest. In my humble opinion, we are in that time. We're not in the tribulation yet, the 7 years that ancient prophetic text talks about, but we are leading up to it, and it's very alarming.
It is very alarming. I mean, you've seen since 2010 began, you've seen nothing in the news but earthquakes here and volcanoes erupting there and floods, and I mean, it really opens your eyes if you're paying attention. Now, you talked about the BP oil, and for a moment I'd like to touch on that. In the Hopi prophecy, there's a part where it mentions man touching the sea and the sea turning black. Do you think that they were talking maybe about that, about oil?
Okay, here's the deal. The new book I'm working on is called The Cosmic Chess Match. It took me a year of research to pin down some of these different prophecies. And I didn't understand. And let me back things up. There are many prophecies: Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Blossom Goodchild, the Modern Prophet, Hopi Indians, Mayans. Okay, so sometimes they're right, but oftentimes they're wrong. In other words, with Nostradamus, they boast his accuracy at 60%. Edgar Casey Foundation, 60 to 70%. Okay, Hopi Indians, perhaps a little less than that. Mayans, who knows? Blossom Goodchild, who knows? But the point is, they're not 100% accurate. So I looked at this, and I was wondering, I was saying to myself, how is it that they get some stuff right, but a lot of the stuff is totally wrong? Whereas the ancient prophecies that I hold to are 100% accurate 100% of the time. There's no false prophecy. They're never wrong. Never wrong. So you've got a disparity between the two camps. On one side of the aisle, you've got these ancient texts, which prophetic writings, which are 100% accurate. On the other side of the aisle, Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Blossom Goodchild, the Hopi Indians, and the Mayan prophecies, to name a few. You've got some of these prophecies which are true. Many don't come to pass and are actually proven to be false. I'll give you one. Okay. Edgar Casey talked about Atlantis rising, and he gave a date. Well, that hasn't happened. The date is long since done. It's decades ago. Atlantis never did rise. So Edgar Casey was wrong just in that one prophecy. In some of the others, he was correct. Here's the deal. Here's what I've discovered, and this is all covered in the new book, which will be released next year, 2011. It's called The Cosmic Chess Match. There are different dimensions. We are stuck in the space-time continuum. For the purpose of this conversation, we will call this time-space continuum, which you and I live in, the first heaven. That's what we'll call it, okay? The second heaven is another dimension. Okay, but before I get there, in the first heaven, and the analogy is the cornfield of analogy because it's something we can get our heads around. We are standing in a cornfield. The corn is 8 feet tall. Okay, we see the corn in front of us, the corn to the left of us, to the right, and to the rear. That's it. We don't see anything else. The corn towers over our head. That represents our view of time. We are stuck in the space-time continuum. What I mean by that is 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. We are stuck. We watch time slowly tick by a second at a time. We are standing in the cornfield. We see none of the future. We see none. We know what the past is, but we absolutely have no view of the future. Nothing at all. Okay. Now, This is the first heaven. You dwell in the second heaven. Time and space is different. And the cornfield analogy, which is a way to, take it down in layman's terms, a way we all can understand it. Somebody comes in a shiny red fire truck with a 2-story extension ladder into the cornfield, right next to you.
Right.
Powers up that extension ladder. It's up 40 feet in the air. Someone climbs up to the top. Guess what? They can see not only where you're standing in the cornfield, they can see to the edge of the cornfield and the cornfield beyond that. So their view of time isn't infinite. It's still finite, but it sees further than we do in the time-space continuum. They're not the second heaven, which is represented by the fire truck, has a different perspective of time. This is why those beings in the second heaven get some things right, but not all things right. Now we've got the third heaven, and the being, which I will call El Elyon, which is the Hebrew for Most High God, is in the space shuttle with a telephoto lens. Guess what? He sees not only the cornfield and the cornfield beyond that, he sees as far as he wants to see, infinitely. And that's it's a simple analogy, but it's a way to get our head around something very complex and very abstract. When El Elyon gives a prophecy, he sees all through time, everything. He sees everything, which is why he's 100% accurate 100% of the time. The Hopi Indians get some things right, just like the Mayans, Blossom Goodchild, Edgar Cayce, and Nostradamus. But it's information that is gleaned from and accessed from the second heaven, which opens up a whole can of worms. Who resides in the second heaven? And in my opinion, and I've got ancient biblical text to prove it, the fallen angels reside in the second heaven, which is why you cannot trust any of the information, because you don't know what's true and you don't know what's false. Even if they're accurate in one thing, they may be completely inaccurate in the other. And Nostradamus and everybody else I just mentioned, Cayce, Goodchild, Hopis, Mayans, they get some things right, but they're not 100% accurate. Therefore, from ancient prophetic texts, we know that they would be construed as false prophets, which is why you can't trust it.
Okay. Now, with these devastating events that have been happening around the world, especially this past year, aren't these just an Earth cycle? Hasn't this gone on the Earth before?
Well, and that's interesting to theorize. Are we looking at, and this is what I keep mentioning, is it business as usual, or are we looking at the fulfillment of prophecy? Wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes in diverse places, famines and pestilence, troublesome times. Go back 2 or 3 years. None of this was going on. Go back 10 or 20 years. None of this was going on. Not like now. Not like now. And then you add to that the supernatural aspect, which we haven't really talked about, the idea of the breeding program, satanic super soldiers, alien implants, alien abductions, the idea of a hybrid race, which mirrors the Genesis 6 or the Book of Enoch accounts of fallen angels cohabiting, taking wives, marrying, having this offspring, which was anathema, cursed, the Nephilim, which resulted in the flood. There's a prophecy that says, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. What differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in history in my opinion, is the presence of the B'nai Elohim, the fallen angels, coming down to earth, cohabiting with the daughters of men, having children by them, which were the Nephilim, this demonic hybrid, which was never supposed to exist, but did. And we are in those days. Now, critics will say, well, that's, they were eating and drinking. Well, fine. But we go back to the Genesis 6 account, and we certainly go to the book of Enoch, and we're not talking people here. Yeah, people were eating and drinking and giving in marriage, fine. But what the text really talks about is the idea of fallen angels coming to earth, having sex with the women. And this is exactly what we're seeing in the so-called breeding program, alien abduction scenario, which is happening globally. I mean, I get emails all week long from people having problems, being abducted, talking about seeing hybrids. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The rabbit hole is very deep, very dark, very nefarious, and in my opinion, incredibly malevolent, evil.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And, I know there's quite a few people out there who do believe that there's a hybrid race and that they're going to return to Earth even, and some that are even here amongst us. And I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, you look up into space, there's a lot up there. And I don't think that we're the only life here for sure. Now, with all the events going on here in 2010, and certainly probably going to get even more worse in 2011, do you think 2012 is just a distraction? I do.
That is a great question, and we're on the same page there. I call 2012, and I will address this in the new up-and-coming book, The Cosmic Chess Match. I call 2012 a planned obfuscation, a deliberately staged self-fulfilling prophetic event. Deliberately staged, self-fulfilling prophetic event. In other words, everybody's looking at 2012. It's a distraction. Meanwhile, all this other real prophecy is happening in real time. How many people know about Nostradamus but have no clue of Ezekiel 38, which is what's shaping up right now on the world stage? And I rest my case right there. You get the man on the street and you go, hey, what about 2012 and Nostradamus? They'll be able to talk about it. Yeah, I've heard something about that. It's like, 2012, Nostradamus, yeah, it could be. I sort of believe in that. And if you ask the same person, well, what about Ezekiel 38? They'll give you the deer in the headlights. They have no idea what you're talking about. The 2012 thing is a deliberate obfuscation. It's a distraction, a deliberate distraction by the beings that inhabit the second heaven to call attention away from real prophecy, 100% accurate, which is being fulfilled right under our noses. But you got to know what it says, and you got to know where to look. And once you know what the prophecy is, all of a sudden this stuff just jumps off the news, and it's alarming. And I mean alarming. And we are looking at it. We're staring at it right in the face.
One of my listeners in the chat room asked if possibly, when referred to Bible verses, if he can ask you to quote the book and verses so that he can look at it. He says he's very interested. And I don't know as though you can do that here on the show, maybe on the website. Okay.
Yeah, just tell me go to Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. The reason why I don't do that is because it sounds, we've heard that stuff on religious programming. Sure. And all that, and that's fine. But it can sound religious, which is why I pull away from that. All that is they're markers. They're just markers. It's like saying it enables the person in the chat room to turn to that book, turn to that chapter, and read what I'm talking about. That's all it is. There's nothing religious about it or holy or anything else. It's just a marker that men put in there. Do you understand? Men put chapter and verses in there. In the original text, none of that stuff existed. But to communicate with one another, right, they broke things up into chapters, and they, chapter 24, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, so people could communicate quickly. That's all it is. There's nothing, religious or holy about that, or anything. It's all inventions of men. And that can do more damage than good. because it obfuscates the centrality of the message, which is that the prophecies are happening. In Matthew 24, tell them to look up Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, the synoptic gospels, which basically the fancy word just meaning that three guys wrote about the same event, and they all dovetail together. They all sync up together. And those three gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 2,000 years ago, they all talk about the same thing. I gave you chapter and verse for your guy in the chat room.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and he heard you, and he's already going to it.
There
so
you go,
now,
good.
what's going on in Russia with all the fires and so on? If they don't get this under control, what are all those people going to do? Are they going to start having to migrate?
Well, I mean, look, we are in tenuous times. Russia has already said we're not going to export wheat. Now we're looking at food shortages. Crops in California have not ripened. There's a global, in some places there's too much water like Pakistan, and other places like Russia there's a drought, not enough water. So things aren't growing. What is growing is being flooded over. We are looking at food shortages, more than likely food shortages. How severe, I don't know. If you have a brain in your head, you're going to get 4 to 6 months worth of food stocked up. You're just going to can food, you know, get a bunch of rice, get a bag of rice, put it in a steel trash can, you know, check it every now and then, get tons of canned food. I mean, we're crazy if we don't do this. 150 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, this was a way of life. You grew the food, you'd stockpile the stuff up to get you through to the next harvest. So you needed a year to get you through to the next planting cycle. Well, here's something which is alarming. In California, where I live, remember I said we haven't had a summer like this since 1914. Well, I have a very vibrant garden out here. I love to garden, and I'm getting ready to plant my fall crop here. Onion sets and some Brussels sprouts and some other vegetables, lettuce, different types of lettuce, and all this stuff. My zucchini never ripened. I've got one Japanese cucumber. It's about 8 inches long. That's it. The peppers have been stunted. My grapes, I've got 65 Merlot plants that make my own wine. The grapes are very slow to ripen. I'm wondering whether they will ripen. So I'll check them tomorrow and see the sugar content before I pick them. They've got to be 23.5 bricks. I think we'll go well into October. Hopefully we'll get more sunny days and the grapes will ripen. This is what we're up against. So things aren't ripening. Then you look at the honeybees. You see, it's all related. This is what, you start putting these things together. How many people do this? This is what's so great about your program. Thanks for having me on. Your listeners will get an overview of what's going on. The honeybees have died off.
Yes.
And the honeybees pollinate the plants. Without the honeybees, nothing ripens, folks. Nothing, get this, nothing pollinates. Therefore, there is no crop. If there were no honeybees, there'd be no pollination or very little, so things wouldn't grow.
And
honeybees are essential.
I forget exactly where it was, but there was somewhere where they found a bunch of alligators and turtles and so many other species that died. And I guess they tried to say that the temperatures got a little too cold in the water they were in. That's the river in Bolivia, and it's become a news media blackout. There were 6 million, an estimate, 6 million aquatic life. There's video of a guy going up the river, and all around him, alligators, dolphins, all sorts of fish. Everybody's dead. Millions and millions and millions of aquatic life. That was in Bolivia. So much for Al Gore's inconvenient lie of global warming. That's exactly the opposite of what we're looking at. Exactly the opposite of what we're looking at. Oh, I agree with you on that one. I've criticized Al Gore several times on this show. His little campaign there is just all about making money. It has nothing to do with what's really going on.
No,
that's
not at
for
all.
Sure.
Another useful idiot to distract everybody.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Now, how did these people know this stuff related to the prophecy? How did they know what was going to happen?
Well, this gets into and remember, when I talk to people about this stuff, it's like the Pope, and I'm going to say this first to get to where I'm trying to get to, okay? The Pope is in England. He's got all these robes and vestments, and the vicar of the Anglican Church met with him. He's got robes and vestments. The Pope's got more attendants than anybody on the planet. You know, every place he walks, there's like this. He's got the Pope-mobile. He's got security. He's got attendants that do this, that do that, and all these vestments and robes and all these other officials in the church. This is all man-made, okay? All this is man-made. It has nothing. Hear what I'm saying. Zero, zilch, nada. Nothing to do with what happened 2,000 years ago or what happened 4,000 years ago. All man-made institutions, okay? That's what it is. Like it or not, all this is man-made stuff. Okay, it's gobbledygook, in my opinion. So you've got these ancient prophetic texts that are coming to us from the third heaven by a being which I will call El Elyon, the Most High God. That's the Hebrew word for Most High God. He's outside the space-time continuum. I believe that the Most High God created everything in the universe because Darwinism doesn't know, and the Big Bang, you know, Stephen Hawking, it's hysterical. He comes out and goes, well, the universe could have just started by itself. There's no need for God. Okay, great. So let me get this. A man with a finite mind is going to try to decipher the infinite? That's not going to work. I don't care how smart you are. It's not going to work. You can't figure it out because you've got a finite brain. How can a finite brain look at the infinite and come up with an answer? No one knows. If we're intellectually honest, and Darwinists hate me for this, if we're intellectually honest, no one knows how any of this happened. And intelligent design tells us that these systems are so complex, even the single cell, are so complex. And then you look at the human body with this complex DNA structure and all these different systems which integrate with each other. It's like, give me a break. I mean, you think this just happened by accident? Of course.
Yeah, there's some intelligence behind this. There's no doubt about it. Just the way everything helps everything else live here on this planet, and just the way everything has been designed so intelligently.
Exactly.
I guess if it was just a God, I think he wouldn't have had to go through all the complications of it. Just make it happen, right?
Well, and that's what we're told. We're told in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Bible, we're told that, you know, he created this everything ex nihilo from nothing. He spoke it into existence, literally. Spoke it into existence. When Yahshua, which some people know as Jesus, his real name in the Hebrew is Yahshua, walked the earth 2,000 years ago, he manipulated matter at the cellular level. I'll give you an example, which we're told about. And it's like, travel with me for a second here, because this stuff is remarkable. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking like this is like supernatural off the charts. If you had leprosy in the ancient world, that was a death sentence. You'd watch your flesh rot away on your body. You couldn't touch anybody. You joined a leper colony, and you'd beg for food, and eventually you would die a horrible death. Dreadful. So the story is 10 lepers, a bunch of lepers, right? They're far off because they can't come near the crowd. So they're yelling at Yahshua, Son of David, have mercy on us, kill us, because they've heard that Yahshua was healing people. So he yells back and goes, you're healed, go your way. Guess what? All the lepers, every single one of them, is cured instantaneously. How did he do that? On the cellular, molecular level, he's changing their structure, removing a disease and making them whole. I mean, you don't think that's a good thing?
That's amazing.
And this is what, you see, religion obfuscates this. And this is why I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. Here's what Yahshua does, which is mind-blowing. It's so supernatural, it's off the flipping charts. And yet, you know, it's like you go to a church service and some guy says this thing and it's stained glass windows and candles and some guy in a funny robe and everybody's confused and it's like the whole thing gets lost. It's mind-blowing and it's good. It's wonderful. These guys got healed. This is a great thing. This is wonderful. And who does he say he is? He says, I am that I am. This is why they killed him, because he said, before Abraham was, I am. He's using the word Jehovah. You got to understand this. I mean, this is another conversation, but he's saying, before Abraham, I am. They said, what? You're God? No, we're going to kill you for that. And that's why they killed him. but that's who he was. And of course, the whole thing with the cross and the blood on the cross and the sacrifice, that's a whole other story too. Maybe we'll get to that in the second hour. But the bottom line is this. El Elyon, the Most High God, and Yahshua are one and the same. Different aspects, but one and the same. They're benevolent, they're wonderful, they're good. There's this cosmic war that's going on, been going on, between the fallen angels and the good angels, between El Elyon and the fallen one. They're unequally yoked. El Elyon has got it wired. We know he's already written what's going to happen in advance. And it's, at some point in time, there's going to be this battle. Some people call it the apocalypse or Armageddon. It's going to happen. So the prophecies are written there ahead of time to show us two things. One thing is that there is the Most High God, the only one who can tell with 100% accuracy the end, call things out before they happen, way in the future. He knows the end before the beginning and the beginning before the end. Go figure.
Sure.
Because he's outside the space-time continuum. The fallen one in the second heaven doesn't know. He's not infinite. He's finite. Even though he's in a different dimension, and the time-space continuum properties are different there than they are here. He can't see everything. He doesn't know everything. And so this is what we're up against. And this is this cosmic battle that we're in that's about to spill over onto this planet. And we are seeing it manifest everywhere with the earthquakes, the floods, the famines, the droughts, the wars and rumors of wars, the fires, the volcanoes, the Gulf Stream. All this stuff is the troublesome times, like the BP oil spill, the coming economic collapse, the tension in the Middle East. It's all interconnected. And if you've got a spiritual lens to see it through, you can get a grasp, a good overview of what's going on. And that's what the show's about tonight. That's what I'm trying to, give to your listeners, an overview that we are looking at the supernatural manifesting on this planet. Literally, everything we're looking at has supernatural roots to it. Everything, absolutely everything. And it's manifesting in real time today.
Absolutely. And now you touched on the Gulf Stream, and I wanted to go there for a moment. Now, it's said that the Gulf Stream is slowing down. Is there any truth to that? And could oil or something more bigger be causing this?
Well, look, the oil and the Cortex, they pump millions of gallons of this stuff. And I saw a video today in New Orleans. They opened up some estuary or some river, and this guy is just amazing. It's an amazing report. He goes up to the BP guys and goes, there's oil here, and they go, the guy's a weasel. The BP guy's a total weasel, and he goes, well, we'll just have picking up tar balls, and he goes, well, okay, would you go in this water? Well, I can't comment on that. Excuse me, you're a weasel. You can't comment on that? You're a weasel. And the guy reaches down into the sand, right, into the water, and scoops up sludge. It's all oil. He's got rubber gloves on. And he goes, this isn't tar balls. This isn't tar balls, tar balls. This is not tar balls. I can't. And the BP guy goes, I can't comment on that. And he goes, would you swim in this water? Would you have your children swim in this water? I can't comment on that. Guy's a weasel. I mean, here's the evidence right in front of us. What happened was the oil sunk to the bottom of the Gulf. That's where it all is.
Oh, it sure did.
Bottom. Yeah, it's on the bottom. You got dead zones everywhere. It will probably, more than likely, kill off millions more fish, millions more aquatic life, and it will more than likely stall the Gulf Stream. Some people believe that it's already stalled the Gulf Stream. And you see, you can't get, when you got, this is what cracks me up. You get a guy, here's a guy on the beach from BP, and he's a total weasel. He's not being honest. He's hiding something. He's lying. He's obfuscating the information because he doesn't want the truth out. And that is pernicious. That is malevolent. That is wrong. It is so wrong. It's just ridiculous. And then, our politicians are going, oh, it's okay, just bring your boys down here and put them in the river. It's all fine, everything's fine. No, it's not. It's not fine at all. Look at this. It's sludge on the bottom of this thing. It's it's beyond the pale.
Absolutely, and there's been so many wash-ups of dead fish by the thousands.
Right? Look in New Jersey, tens of thousands of fish wash up. When was the last time you heard anything about that? Same thing in Florida. Stingrays beaching themselves on the beach. Sharks beaching themselves on the beach. Whole pods of dolphins dying out in the sea. Whales. I mean, this is a mess. And what do we get in America? The rantings and the ridiculous antics of Paris Hilton. Lindsay Lohan tested positive for drugs. She may have to do another 30 days.
What a surprise, right?
Yeah. I'm just shocked. OJ. They had some new stuff on OJ. In other words, we're shown all this ridiculous pablum, this just junk to keep us from looking, and it's deliberate, folks, keep us from looking at what's really going on. And what's cool is that many Americans are starting to wake up. Shows like yours and other shows, people are awakening. People are realizing that, what's going on here is not a good thing, and it's time for regime change in this country, and we need to, I'm getting a little political here, but both sides of the aisle, get rid of the career politicians. We need to look at what's going on in this country if we're going to have a country in the next decade, because where we're headed is the end of America as we know it. And stuff like
getting political is okay with me for a minute, because another thing I wanted to talk about was another man-made disaster is the problem of economies around the world, and how does that play into the prophecies as well?
Well, here's a guy like Alan Greenspan, Federal Reserve, and people need to understand that the Federal Reserve is not federal. It has nothing to do with our government. We were hijacked. 1917, Jekyll Island. Do your homework, read it, understand what happened in 1917, and how a cadre of international bankers took control of our monetary system. We're hosed, folks. We're hosed. Greenspan and Bernanke have nothing to do with the federal government. They are figureheads. They are spokesholes for this international cadre of bankers, the Federal Reserve, which controls our monetary system. I believe, and this might sound far out, but it's documented. Kennedy was assassinated for two reasons, actually three. One, and this is all, go back and do your homework. Don't take my word for it.
Our last real president too.
We agree, Michael. We agree. He is our last real president. Everyone since then has been just a shill. Kennedy did one thing, three things he was trying to do. He was going to splinter the CIA into 1,000 parts, splinters. That's his quote. He was going to go after the Federal Reserve because he knew what it was. He was going to shut down the Federal Reserve and take back our currency from the international bankers. Okay, and he was going to pull our troops out of Vietnam. They blew them away in Dallas, folks.
Mm-hmm.
You want to believe Arnold Specter and the single bullet theory? Arnold Specter. Mr. Weasel himself. I mean, there's another weasel. Well, if you believe in the single bullet, I'll treat you like a single bullet. I mean, the guy is just like such a pompous windbag. He drives me crazy. He's the one who came up with this ridiculous thing. The American people bought it because our government would lie to us. He was our last president. Everybody since then, everybody, including Reagan and all the sacred cows. Look what Bush did. Bush spent money like a drunken sailor, got us involved in two ridiculous wars. Afghanistan, where, by the way, folks, $1 trillion a year is made off the opium. Well, gee, let's go back a little while back in history, and let's look at the opium wars. And this is we're dumbed down in this country. We're not taught history. We have to be politically correct. We don't want to offend anyone here. Okay, fine.
You're so right.
Let's talk about the opium wars. Okay, the British went to war, and I'm not making this stuff up, and most of your listeners probably don't know this. Google opium wars. Spend 10 minutes and read it. It's not like you got to go to the frickin' library and get a book. Google it. It's right there. Google opium wars. It'll take all your listeners. We all have computers. Google opium wars instead of Lady Gaga and read what it says. The British went to war with the Chinese. Get this. I'm not making this up. The British went to war with the Chinese for the right to sell opium to the Chinese people. And the Chinese lost the war, and the Brits came in and sold opium to the Chinese. What do you think the opium dens were about? Do you think anything's changed? Where do you think the $1 trillion made on the opium crop in Afghanistan goes? Wake up, folks. It's not about the Taliban and a bunch of guys running around in caves. Yeah, the Taliban existed. It's about the opium crop and $1 trillion a year. And eventually the pipeline from Kazakhstan through Afghanistan through to wherever they want to get it to pump the oil out. But the opium thing, the pipeline's down the road. The opium thing's been going on for years. That's one thing. And then you got the Iraq, ridiculous, why did he go in there? We got to get Saddam. He's got weapons of mass destruction. Sure, he had weapons of mass destruction. I'm not denying that. He gassed, 20,000 Kurds?
He sure did.
20,000 people gassed? I mean, he had that's weapons of mass destruction. He had them. Where did they go? They went into Syria. Syria's got them. Syria's got all the chemical weapons. Why are we in Iraq? Good question. Ancient Babylon is there. I have a whole theory with I call it the Luciferian dialectic. A dialectic is conflict, counter-conflict, synthesis. Conflict is this, 9/11. Doesn't matter what you think, who did what, planes, terrorists, missiles, who cares? The conflict, that all can be ironed out in the wash. That's the conflict. But the counter-conflict is what? Iraq and Afghanistan. The synthesis we have not seen yet. Watch what happens as we've pulled out. The sectarian violence is raging. Iran's licking its chops. Watch what happens in Iraq. Because if the king of Jordan moves into Iraq and offers a constitutional monarchy because he's a strong man, the king of Jordan is a Hashemite king. Hashem is the uncle of Muhammad. So he's a direct descendant. The king of Jordan, King Abdullah II, is a direct descendant of Muhammad. So he holds great sway in the Muslim world. Both Shia and Sunni respect him. He's a strong man. If he moves into Iraq, this is just a scenario, but it's one that I've been watching and waiting for. He will set up his capital not in Baghdad, in Babylon. He will then annex his country of Jordan and allow the Palestinians to create their own homeland in part of Jordan. Okay, Jordan borders Iraq, by the way. Thus solving the conundrum of basically 60 years of the independent Palestinian state. He then will allow the Israelis to rebuild their temple on Jerusalem. Why? Because the king of Jordan, King Abdullah II, is the only person on the planet. I'm not making this up. Google Hashemite King, Jerusalem, Temple Mount. Watch what comes up. Hashemite King, Jerusalem, Temple Mount. Watch what comes up, okay? And you will see that the Hashemite King, Abdullah II, controls not only the Temple Mount, but the sites, the holy sites in Mecca and Medina. He controls what happens on the Temple Mount. It all goes back to King Abdullah because, again, he's a direct descendant of Muhammad. He controls what happens on the Temple Mount. He's the only person on this planet that can allow the Israelis, allow the Jews to rebuild their third temple on the Temple Mount. If he does that, ancient prophetic text tells us specifically whoever cuts the deal, brokers the deal to rebuild the third temple is the Antichrist.
Which I was just going to say, then, you obviously believe that there is an Antichrist out there.
Absolutely.
And that it's all going to come to a head. Now, do you think we're at the peak of all this right now? It sure feels like it.
No, we're not the peak. We're not even close to the peak. We're entering into it. We're I would say we're 10 steps away from the front door. We're not at the front door. We're 10 steps away, but we're moving. A year ago, we weren't even in the yard. We were out on the street, sitting in our cars. Now we've gotten out of the cars, walked down the walkway. We're 10 steps away from the front door. We're not in it yet. We're about to go into it, but we're not in it yet. But the signs are here. The signs are everywhere. I've been talking about them for the last hour. Earthquakes, wars, rumors of war, famines, pestilence, troublesome times. It's everywhere, all around us. Wake up, folks.
The signs are everywhere, and I wonder, is there a bright side to any of this? I mean, is there any hope I mean, it comes to a peak, but at some point, won't it come to an end? Things may be different, maybe brighter, like
Well,
the battle
it is.
between the good and evil.
Yeah, it is, and we're told this. And this is, again, you know, it can sound religious because, unfortunately, it's been painted that way. But if we look at it from in the standpoint of a cosmic war, a cosmic chess match between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, and Yeshua says, when I return, I will return as a king. My second coming will be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. He's telling him what it's going to be like. When he returns, when the second coming happens, and see, people don't understand this. Yeah, there's a battle of Armageddon. The Antichrist has assembled the kings of the earth, and he does this supernaturally. He sends out these spirits which have been chained near the Euphrates River for millennia, thousands and thousands of years. They become unchained. And he sends out these spirits and gathers the kings of the earth. Why? To fight Yeshua, the second coming. He's gathered there in Armageddon, the plains of Megiddo in Israel. He gathers the kings of the earth, and they're all looking up. They think they can win the battle. Well, guess what? Yeshua rides in and destroys them with the breath of his coming, literally, and I believe it's literal. And all hell is destroyed. When we're told, and this is the promise, it's not, and again, it's not religious. It's what we're dealing with. These powerful forces which have been raging. This war, this cosmic war, has been raging for thousands and thousands of years. It's coming to a climax, and when it climaxes, remember we talked about when Yeshua was here, he was healing leprosy. If you were blind. I mean, there's one story.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this story, okay? And again,
okay.
you know, you get it in a church setting, and it's like, this is what you hear. And Jesus said, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, and your eyes will see. And then, you know, someone rings a bell or lights some incense, and people stand up, and, you know, it's crazy. And when it is, it's an account of an unbelievable story. This guy was born with no eyes. He was born blind. Okay, that's crazy, all right? And Yeshua's there, and this guy, you know, comes up to him, and there's a dialogue between them. And Yeshua says, you know, what do you want? The guy says, that I may see. And he does this whole weird thing, and I don't understand this. He spits on the ground, on the dirt, in the clay, and rubs it in his hands, and then puts it over the man's eyes. Remember, the man is born blind from birth, never saw, probably no eyes in the sockets. Who knows, right? And all of a sudden, the man's sight is restored. I mean, that's nuts. That's crazy. That's never happened in the modern era. That's just bizarre. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's not like, you know, you don't even have to think about it. It's a wonderful, great thing. This is the kind of stuff he does all the time. So he does this to show us who he is, what his character is, and he's incredibly benevolent, wonderful, good. But who does he say he is? He says he's God. He says, if you see me, you've seen the Father. He's proclaiming himself to be El Elyon. I and the Father are one. That's unbelievable. And so when he comes back the second time, it's to finally put down the fallen one, the fallen angels, and remove them and set up the earth the way it was supposed to be set up. And that's where it's headed. That's the glimmer of hope. There's no sickness, there's no death, there's no disease, there's no tears.
Unfortunately, I probably won't see that side of things, but you know, it really sounds good, and I hope that you know, when it all does come to push and shove, that good does overvail evil. You know, and now with this, the person to actually watch for, the player in all this, would be the person who puts together the deal to get that temple rebuilt. Am I right?
Yeah, I would. I mean, if you want to try to keep tabs on the Antichrist, that's what to watch. The Jews in Israel already have the stones hewn and numbered, ready to go up to the temple. They've got all the temple implements reconstructed and built. Some people believe that they have the ashes of the red heifer, which they need in order to actually even enter the Temple Mount. They have to have the ashes of the red heifer, which is a 2-hour discussion, okay? I don't even want to get into that. But they need the ashes of the red heifer. We know that before the Romans came in AD, I mean, this stuff gets, the rabbit hole goes down so deep, it's mind-numbing. We know that in AD 70, this is almost 2,000 years ago, before the Romans came in and destroyed the temple, that the Jews, remember, they laid siege to Jerusalem for about 2 years. Okay? Yes. Before they broke through the walls. The high priest took the ashes of the red heifer that they had and they hid them. They took the incense and they hid them. They took the temple treasures and they hid them. Guess what? They found the incense. They found a ton of incense, literally a ton of incense from antiquity 2,000 years ago. Some people believe, Robert Reland, who I've had on my show in his great book, which I've read, it's about 800 pages long. It's just fascinating. And he talks about, he believes, and I believe with him, that the ashes of the red heifer have been recovered. So the Israelis probably have the ashes of the red heifer. They're waiting to use them. And before they can go to the Temple Mount, they have to consecrate the temple by the Mosaic law with the ashes of the red heifer. So it's so cosmic. It's so complex and so cosmic. It's mind-blowing. And the more you look at it, and we realize that it's all unraveling right in front of us, it's being fulfilled right in front of us. In this day, 500 years ago, none of this stuff was going on. None of it. 50 years ago, some of it was going on because Israel was finally regathered. The Jews were regathered from the four corners of the earth, reestablishing their ancient homeland, Israel, fulfilling yet another prophecy. Very, very specific. But go back 100 years, and no one will be talking about this stuff because it wasn't the time. Now is the time. We're in it. It's all around us, and it's beginning to manifest.
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the events happening around this planet, and, I mean, everything is falling right into place, especially with all the havoc in the Middle East right now. And I want to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. And when I come back, I want to ask you about Turkey and how significant they are in all this. So everybody, if you want to call in, the number is 347-989-1012, and press 1 so I know you want to get on the air. I'm Michael Vera, and my guest tonight is L.A. Marzulli, and we'll be back in just a moment, everyone. Marzulli, sir, we are back, and yeah, why is Turkey so significant in this whole thing?
Well, there's a prophecy again. This prophecy is 2,600 years old, 2,600 years old, okay? So it's like, we talk about the Mayan calendar, Nostradamus, and all this other nonsense. Okay, fine. This prophecy is 2,600 years old, and it's very, very specific. It says, after I have regathered you, talking about Israel, the Jews, from the four corners of the earth and reestablish you in your ancient homeland, a people dwelling without walls and in safety, okay? 2,600 years ago, a vision like that, you wouldn't know what you were talking about. What is the prophet seeing? Because in the ancient world, every city had a huge wall around it. Because if you didn't, your neighbor would come over there and, run amok, run over your defenses, whatever defenses you had, take all your goods, take your women, rape your women, kill the men, take the children as slaves, and there you go, and burn your city. Thank you very much. So all the cities in the ancient world had walls around them. And yet the prophecy says for 2,600 years ago, you see, today we look at this and we skip over the, I don't know what that means, who cares, right? But we have to understand, 2,600 years ago, that's mind-boggling. A land dwelling without walls or gates? Hello? Until the advent of the airplane, and that's not that long ago, every city, go to Europe. Look at all the villages. They still have the walls there, Go to the Middle East. There are still cities with ancient walls around them. Go to Israel today. Go to Tel Aviv, no wall. Jerusalem, no wall. Beersheba, no wall. Go to Galilee, all the cities up in there. No walls. No walls anywhere. It's a land dwelling without walls or gates or bars. That's the first thing. Okay, so this is all the Ezekiel 38 prophecy that I'm talking about, 2,600 years ago. It says, in the latter days, I will gather Gog, Magog, Persia, Meshach, and Tubal, and Togarmah, Ethiopia, and a couple of other nations are mentioned. Okay? Well, you look at that and you kind of shrug your shoulders. I have no idea what that means. Fine. A little bit of research. Magog is Russia. Has always been looked at as Russia. Most biblical scholars equate Magog with Russia. Not all agree. Most agree. The second one hasn't changed. Persia is Iran. Period. It's been that way for thousands of years. So there's no mystery there. Well, you say, well, what about Meshach and Tubal? Well, again, it's just like, look, JFK used to be called what before it was called JFK? Cape Canaveral? Get what I mean? Now it's called, the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? See that? So the names change. Same area, same exact area on the map. The names change. Same thing with Meshach and Tubal. Meshach, Tubal, and Togarmah now comprise the modern nation of Turkey, which is why a month and a half ago, when Turkey, after being pro-Western since Ataturk after World War I, and looking towards the West, a secular society, even though they're like 98% Muslim or whatever, I don't think it's quite that. I think it's like 95% Muslim. All of a sudden, they have a peace treaty with Israel. All of a sudden, they're backing away from the West and looking where? Towards Iran. Huge. I about fell out of my chair. Huge. This week, they passed in the Turkish government. They're becoming they're moving away from their secular society, looking towards Iran. They're going to create a Muslim state.
And the Soviets, too, aren't they?
Well, I don't know about the Soviets. I mean, the thing is, the Russians...
Well, Russia, yeah.
Yeah, Russia is Magog. And Russia has got its fingerprints and its hands all over the Middle East. Russia is supplying Iran.
So does China.
Syria. Yeah, exactly. So the Ezekiel 38, in my opinion, prophecy is pregnant. It's ready to explode in any minute. It's ready to happen. When, I have no idea. But it's with Turkey in the last month or so moving away from its alliance with the West, which has been there for decades, and now looking towards Iran, Persia. That's huge to me. Because, and see, this is the difference between Nostradamus, Casey Muslim, Goodchild, the whole crew there, right? This is done 2,600 years ago. Not like Nostradamus' fuzzy quatrains, which when you read them, you kind of go, well, that could mean, who knows? With great specificity. You can give that to a high school student, and he can read that and go, well, there seems to be a list of nations. Not sure who Magog is, but gee, I know Persia. Persia's Iran. Okay, good, you got one right. Very good. With a little bit of research, you could uncover very quickly that Turkey was called at one time Meshach and Togarmah and Tubal. With very, very little research, you would find that out. And so what we see is the formation of this Ezekiel 38 prophecy 2,600 years ago being not fulfilled, but lining up, getting ready to be fulfilled in our modern day era, in real time right now. And I find that incredibly alarming and very sobering.
I do as well. Now, I feel the borders are a big concern, and I guess I'll ask you, are the southern borders a concern?
Huge. And let me digress for a second and get into the political.
Okay.
If anyone out there thinks for one moment that the federal government can manage a healthcare system for 300 million people, all one has to do to see how it's going to come down is look at the border fence, which the federal government has been trying to complete for 8 years, with overruns of $40 million. Well, we got the wrong, we bought the surveillance gear, and then we realized that, we weren't going to use it anymore. Okay, that's $40 million out of taxpayers' money because government overruns, and they're not going to use it anymore, and the border fence is still not complete. It's 70, 80 miles lays open. This is your federal government. This is the way
Right.
our government does things. Do you want to trust your healthcare system to a government that can't build a fence? I mean, it's just a fence. It's a long fence, but it's a fence. That's all we're doing. We're building a fence here. You know, what's the big deal? 100 yards or, you know, a couple thousand miles? Who cares? These guys can do this stuff. We put a man on the moon.
I don't think they want to. They would rather give amnesty so that they have that many more voters.
There you go. And that's exactly what it is. You know, Arizona's being punished to try to keep. Look, Mexico is inches away from toppling. You want to talk about no rule of law there? It's the most dangerous people. It's the most dangerous place you can be on the planet right now. It's a war zone. The body count there in Mexico is higher than the Afghan and Iraq war combined on a weekly basis.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing.
For quite some time. Been that way for quite some time. So, you know, this is what we're looking at, and I blogged about this. I said, you know, what we need to do to get all these crazy politicians, you know, either have them quit or out of office or expose them and whatever. We need to take them on the taxpayers' dole and get them down to the southern border for a nice little weekend in Juarez. That's what they need to do. Spend the weekend in Juarez. I can just see it now. Okay, get the security down there. You guys need to spend a weekend in Juarez. Get the body count. Look how many people. Watch the drugs. Watch the federalities. Watch the anarchy and the craziness going on down there. And then turn around and say to Arizona, gee, we're really sorry. Arizona's fighting for its very existence, and these yahoos in the federal government are suing them. It's unconscionable. It's so wrong. Not only that, but think of all the tons of drugs which have come up through this country over decades, unabated. Just bring in. Added to that, in the late 90s, Osama bin Laden, and you think what you may of him, but Osama bin Laden, and this is documented, did actually get a fatwa. A fatwa is a religious decree from an imam, which is a Muslim priest, saying basically that, okay, Osama, because this is a jihad, I give you can kill non-enemy combatants with weapons of mass destruction. So Osama, in an interview, one of his last that he gave, declared war on America. He just sits there, sitting there in a tent, and he just openly declares war on the West and America. Well, according to my research and the work of Paul Williams, Al-Qaeda Brotherhood of Terror is the name of this book, he quotes very specifically that Osama brought between 2 and 20 suitcase nukes through the porous southern border in the late 90s. Very easy to do. There was no fence, very easy to do back then. Suitcase nukes left over from the former Soviet Union. They're called suitcases about the size of a foot locker. They're not, and they're dirty bombs. They're not like Hiroshima or Nagasaki. They were at one point. But the detonation codes are lost, plus the nuclear material only has a shelf life of 7 years, and then it won't detonate like a mushroom cloud. But guess what? It's highly radioactive. Put a little C4 in there and wheel that puppy in downtown L.A., and guess what, folks? When you explode it, you've killed 2,000 to 3,000 people right off the bat, but many more become sick because of radiation poisoning. And here's the kicker. Just like Chernobyl, you can't go back there. That's it. You don't go back.
Even Hillary Clinton had mentioned at one time about sleeper cells in the country, if I remember correctly.
Good question. Hillary mentioned about a month and a half ago, probably longer than that now, more like 3 months. She announces on a Monday morning, you know, I just love this, you know, terrorists are trying to get weapons of mass destruction into the United States. Okay, that's interesting. Why are you telling me this on Monday morning? Why are you waiting until now to say this? A few hours later, or not a few hours, but 2 days later, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, president of Iran, stands up and out of the blue announces, if America or Israel or anyone else attacks Iran, we will detonate weapons of mass destruction in American cities. Huh? See, the American people don't even bat an eyelash to that. Ahmadinejad saying this 2 days after Clinton has said this. Well, I just about fell over because I wrote about this in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. It was published in the year 2010 that weapons of mass destruction were already smuggled across the southern border. Basically, Ahmadinejad is a very, very thinly veiled threat here, is telling us that's exactly what's happened. You touch us, we will detonate weapons of mass destruction in American cities. Here's the final kicker. A week after that, a German journalist announces that Osama has been hiding in Iran. Oh, really? That's a big surprise.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. The trail is this. Osama was in Tora Bora, got out during the bombing, fled to the Pakistani drug lords, made a deal with them, brokered a deal with the Iranians, said, look, you let me have sanctuary in Iran, because remember, you can't get into Iran, right? You have sanctuary in Iran, I'll let you have the sleeper cells, access to the sleeper cells in America with, 15, let's just use the number 10 suitcase bombs, radioactive bombs, which you can have the sleeper cells and off you go for safe passage. You allow me to come into Iran and my crew, stay here, wherever the storm, have sanctuary here, I'll give you the sleeper cells. It's a quid pro quo. Connect the dots. German journalist believes that Osama's been there, and you get Hillary talking about this 2 days later on Ahmadinejad saying, you attack us, we'll detonate the weapons, and a week after that, the German journalist telling us that Osama is more than likely in Iran, quid pro quo, some sort of a deal thing, and there it is. So the southern border remains porous. The fence still isn't built. The drugs still continue to go through. The body count goes up daily. And Obama basically dithers and does nothing.
Yeah, I have my own opinions about Obama, and some people don't share them with me, but he's like the sleeper cell from the inside out, just really not doing any good for us at all. Well, especially we're supposed to be in 2 wars. Why wouldn't our borders be protected before another country's borders get protection from us? That's just don't make sense to me at all. Almost like they want something to happen.
I agree, Michael. I couldn't agree with you more. It's deliberate. What we're looking at is deliberate, and it's criminal. It really is. It's absolutely criminal. That border should have been sealed 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about if the illegal immigrants could get across it, so can the terrorists and their suitcase nukes. So I believed since the start of all this that there was already some here. I mean, how couldn't they be? It's so easy to get through here, it seems, because so many millions have. And I think that's where we should have started is protecting our borders for sure. So I agree with you on that 100%.
Absolutely.
Now, going back to the prophecy ordeal, what's the UFO connection rather in all this? How do they play a factor in this?
Great question. We are told, and it's sort of an obscure reference, but you start connecting the dots and we realize that something's going on here. It says in the guidebook of the supernatural, which I call the, most people call the Bible. I call it the guidebook of the supernatural because, in my opinion, that's really what it is. We're told that the fallen one, when he comes with all signs and lying wonders. We're told from Yeshua, men won't faint from fear, from what is coming on the earth. We're told from Yeshua that the elect would be deceived if that were possible. We're told again from Yeshua, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. No flesh would survive. So we're talking, you put all that stuff together, we're talking some very, very tenuous times, troublesome times, and that's what we're into. We are rapidly moving towards this, manifestation of the supernatural. Now, going back to Von Daniken, which we talked about when I first got on the air, UFOs are being seen over 350 per month, roughly, between 300 and 600 a month, somewhere in there. 600 as a high, probably as a low, let's be conservative, 250. Then you've got crop circles, lights in the sky seen by, thousands of people over a period of time. The hybridization program supposedly going on, alien abductions, all this stuff. Is it really extraterrestrial or is it interdimensional? Jacques Vallée calls the phenomena messengers of deception. Messengers of deception, they can't be trusted. That's in his own words. And I believe in exactly the same thing. I think we're looking at, these are not extraterrestrials. It's funny. if you come from, millions of miles away, why not give us the cure to cancer?
Yeah.
Why make crop circles and all this other nonsense? Why not just go, hey, we don't want to freak you guys out, but here's the cure to cancer. That'd be a good thing. But we don't get
sure
that.
would. And, the crop circles, I believe that some are man-made, but some just no way,
I agree. The real ones, oftentimes, the crop is laid down so precise in a woven pattern that when the people get there, they're just blown away. Never seen anything like it. A couple of guys with strings and boards are not making. They're making some of the circles, but certainly not all of them. And see, that therein lies the problem, because the media, and you'll see this anytime anything supernatural happens, the talking heads, they immediately downplay it and make fun of it and sort of ridicule it. Well, after I go to the bar and get a couple of drinks in me, I'd see a crop circle too. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you for demeaning the whole phenomenon, and it's done everywhere, UK, in all the countries of the world. Well, I saw one from Australia, and this guy had photographed some sort of anomalous object over the water. Actually, there were two anomalous objects over the water, and no one knew what they were. And of course, the host on the stupid radio, or not stupid radio, but just the television program is, they're anchors, and they're poking fun of this thing. Well, if I had a couple of beers in me, I'd probably be seeing things. And they're all laughing and ducking it up. And
they do. They always make fun of it.
It's deliberate. They're told to do that. They are I guarantee it, they are told from their bosses, when you read the story, we want you to do it with humor, poke fun at it, keep it real light. So what they do is they disseminate the information extremely slowly to the people, get them used to the fact, there's stuff going on, but it's just a little green men from Earth. It's nothing. Don't worry about anything. And see, it's the people just go, oh yeah, those crop circles, those two guys with the strings and boards, right? Well, yeah, they did a few of the circles, just like some of the ones now are being done by hoaxers. We get that. Not all of them, and certainly not the one with anomalous electromagnetic fields in them. All sorts of weird stuff happens in the real one. So, once again, a modicum of research by our listeners. Google crop circles, electromagnetic fields, crop circle anomaly, and look at some of these. Look, some of these circles are like 700 feet in diameter. They're huge. In England, they only have like 4 hours, 5 hours of darkness before it gets light again. And these guys stake out the fields, waiting for the crop circle to happen. And it's always the same thing. Someone looks the other way, and 15 minutes later, there's a circle in the field. How the heck did that happen?
Sure, nobody's going to do that with boards and ropes, not in 15 minutes. And you would even see trails, I would think, going to it, wouldn't you?
Well, not only that, but, it's one thing to do let's say a 50 or 100-foot circle. It's another thing to do a 700-foot circle with lots and lots of complexity. So much so that the only way you can see it is from the air. And once we look at it from the air, we realize that this is so pristine, so perfectly drawn, that some guys can do some of them, but not the big ones like this, and not with this kind of, just with the crop is laid down and certain electromagnetic anomalies. I'm amazed that more people won't look at this and spend the time to do a little bit of research on their own and realize that this phenomenon is real, it is burgeoning, and is not going away.
Absolutely. Now, when this does come to a peak, how will we know it's not just, say, a world government false flag? It kind of leads me to things like the blue spiral that everybody's seen in the sky in Norway. Yes.
Well, that's also a great question, Michael. You've really done your homework for this interview. Thank you. Hats off to you, sir. I'm on a lot of radio, and you've really pitched me some nice, softballs right over home plate. Boom!
Well, I appreciate it.
Give me a bigger bat. I mean, it's been a great interview, and I appreciate it, having me on and doing your homework, and it's hats off to you for due diligence and, just making it so you know the subject. I'm on a lot of shows with people, and sometimes, the host has really no idea, or as I'm downloading some of this information, they're just kind of blown away because they didn't do their homework. Anyway, all that to say this.
I
what
try.
was the question? What was the question again? Because I got sidetracked with giving you an accolade here. So.
How we would know if it wasn't just a world government false flag being thrown at us?
And that's the $64,000 question. There's going to be a lot of nonsense going on, all sorts of nonsense going on, and the false flag thing certainly can come into play. With Project Bluebeam, like you talked about in the Norway Spiral, what was that? Was it a missile from Russia? I saw both sides of the aisle. I saw, okay, it's a missile, and here's what happened, blah, 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 and here's the equation, and then I saw exactly the opposite. No, it's not a missile. Hello, it's something else. Missiles don't do this. And, some people say it's Project Bluebeam. Other people will say it was HARP. I mean, who knows? The bottom line is we are told, again, in the Guidebook of the Supernatural, that the fallen one comes with all signs of lying wonders. What does that mean? It means basically that people are going to have their minds blown. People won't even believe what's going on this planet. And this was written thousands of years ago. Yet we see that it's ramping up, it's getting ready, the stage is being set for such an event. And why this event happens? Because it changes people's paradigms, their worldview instantaneously, literally, overnight. Boom, they change. They realize that we're not alone in the universe, and this is what I call the alien gospel, that the so-called extraterrestrial created all life on this planet. They genetically manipulated early man. They started the world's earliest civilizations, started the world's religious systems, different religions all over the planet. Now they're back at this critical juncture in human history to usher us into a time of peace and enlightenment. Mm-hmm. So it's all part of the cosmic ruse. And here's the end game. Here's the ultimate end game, other than Yeshua riding in on the white horse and making everything right. Before that, the Antichrist will set himself up in the reconstructed third temple in Jerusalem to be worshipped. That's the end game. The prize is Jerusalem. The prize is the Temple Mount, where the Antichrist seats himself in the temple. It's called the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that desolates. That's what it's called. It's just the height of evil, self-will, and the Most High God wants none of this stuff. But that's the end game. That's why the guy who cuts the deal with the Jews to rebuild the third temple in Jerusalem is the Antichrist. That's why it's there. That's why I'm always looking at the Middle East, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Just to get a viewpoint, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'll go to Debkafal, Jerusalem Post, Arut Shava, just different websites, just to make sure I'm getting a good overview of what's happening in Israel, because everything hinges on what will happen in the Middle East, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it right in front of our eyes unfold. We talked about the Ezekiel 38, Turkey, Meshach, Togarmah, Tubal. We talked about that tonight. The Ezekiel 38 prophecy lining up, getting ready to go. So again, if you know what to look for, you can see this stuff coming down. And tonight, it's been an hour and a half moving in at the close of the interview here, but we've covered a ton of ground, and hopefully we've armed your listeners with some vital information that is imperative.
I think we have. And I started thinking about this kind of thing back when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and then we went in to get them out. I thought, here's the beginning of the mess in the Middle East. And, of course, they've had problems there for a very long time, but you can see them escalating, especially now.
It's absolutely escalating, and it's just a question of, it's not if, it's just when. And hopefully it's not real soon, because once it happens, here's another strategic point that you won't hear on the 6 o'clock news. You just won't hear this. The Iranians have one military capability on the offense. I mean, anything worthwhile. they're caught in the pincer move. And see, people don't even most people, and I'm not trying to sound as an elitist here. This is what I do full time. So I realize that I have more information than most people. Fine, but most people have no idea geographically of where these countries are located. If you were to say, "Hey, where's Afghanistan?" Some people would know, most people wouldn't. If you said, "Where was Afghanistan in relation to Iraq?" It would even be less. If you said, and here's the kicker, give me the bordering countries of the nations of Iran, some people, I believe most people wouldn't have a clue. And
no, they would just say it's in the Middle East. That's about
the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And see, that's why they're dumbed down and they don't understand what's going on. Iran is surrounded by coalition forces. To the east, it's got Afghanistan. A couple 100,000 coalition forces sitting there. In Iraq, it's got at least 50,000 troops, U.S. troops, which are there, and other multinational so-called peacekeepers. Iran is totally surrounded by hostile enemies, and yet the Ruskies, just love this, put the S-300 anti-missile system in Abkhazia, which is a northern province of Georgia. It's a breakaway province of Georgia. So it puts this S-300 anti-missile system up there out of the blue, activates it, it's online, essentially shutting down an attack on Iran's Bashar Iraqer from the northern route by the Israelis.
Right.
I mean, it's deliberate. It's exactly deliberate. So Iran is in a rock and a hard place, literally. To the left of it, to the west of it is the nation of Iraq. To the east of it is the nation of Afghanistan. So we see that it's literally caught in the pincer move. However, on Iran's southern border, it borders up to what's called the Straits of Hormuz. About 40% of all the world's oil ships through that shipping lane. How do you spell radiological blockade? You detonate a bomb in there, which they have more than likely, in the Straits of Hormuz. You cripple the lifeblood of the planet. Combined with this is at the bottom of the Red Sea, the Yemenis, the country of Yemen, there are Al-Qaeda operatives, Iranian operatives, who knows all that's in there. But if they close another narrow strait called the Gate of Tears, both of these straits, by the way, are about 20 miles wide. They're very narrow. They close the shipping lanes with radiological weapons. They basically wipe out the lifeblood of the planet. They stop the flow of oil from the Middle East. Now it's $10, $15 a gallon at the pump. Our already crippled economy completely collapses.
And right now, it looks like there's a tug of war right now. I mean, between Russia, China, and the United States of trying to gain more control in the Middle East. And it just really looks to me like there's going to be an escalation. And I worry because China holds so much of the United States debt. What's going to happen when they say, we want it now?
Well, and here's the thing. If they say, and countries have gone to war over this stuff, if the Chinese say, hey, we got a bunch of paper money, we're holding all your debt, blah, 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 we want it now, the United States will go, sorry, those will fall them alone, just like many other countries had, which further escalates the financial collapse. Let's step back for a second, because time is short here,
okay.
and walk through, give again an overview of what we've talked about, work backwards. Talking about the collapse of the global economy, right? Talking about the idea that anything, if a war happens, oil could go easily to $200 a barrel, $10 a gallon at the pump. Okay? Why isn't anyone doing anything about this? Because there are forces here which we don't see that are pulling and pushing this thing. Then you've got all the earthquakes. There was another one in Costa Rica, I think 5.4, and then one tonight at 6.8. I forget where the epicenter was. 6.8. The earthquakes are on a weekly basis, folks. They're not going away. And we're looking at troublesome times. BP oil spill, that's not troublesome times. What about signs in the heaven? 350 to 500 or 600 even sometimes UFO sightings being reported around the world. Do you think this is just an accident?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's not. It's all, and this is what people need to understand. It's all interconnected. One is working with the other. It's all orchestrated in tandem. What's the end game? To bring about the advent of the Antichrist in the reconstructed third temple.
And do you think that that would lead to this one world government, this new world order that so many talk about? Do you think that plan's in effect as well?
Absolutely. Here's my scenario for that. We will look at the Ezekiel 38-39 war. Israel's enemies will be destroyed, and the Antichrist will somehow raise his ugly head and allow the Jews to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. And this kicks off, once that happens, this kicks off the tribulation period. That's where it's going. It kicks off the tribulation period. So we know at some point before this, there's more than likely going to be what we call the Ezekiel 38 war, which, you know, you mentioned, this huge war in the Middle East. And out of that, the birth pangs of that, essentially, will come, will Israel, expand its borders? Will Israel defeat all of its enemies? It's hard to say. But one thing, I believe that Israel will, right after this Ezekiel 38 war, reconstruct the third temple, which, if we're still here, and who knows, that's anybody's guess, right, at this point. If we are, the guy who cuts the deal is the Antichrist. So, I mean, the times are incredibly exciting, but also extremely tenuous. And if you don't know what's going on, if you don't have the kind of worldview and overview that we've been talking about tonight, it can be very fearful.
And, you know, I wonder if say, Israel knows about this prophecy, and I'm sure they do, why would they even think about rebuilding that temple?
Well, here's the deal. The rabbis know this, okay? But the rabbis look at Daniel, the book of Daniel, and they don't interpret it the same way we do. Okay. So they look at that scripture with the Antichrist, and they don't have the key to unlock it, which is the book of Revelation. See, this is what's amazing. The New Testament is in the Old concealed. The Old Testament is in the New revealed. And when you put the two together, you get this incredible overview. If you're a rabbi, you won't look at the New Testament. It won't even come close. So you're stuck with Daniel and Ezekiel, but you can't quite put it together.
Now, do you think we're actually locked down in this prophecy, or is there a way to change the outcome?
Well, here's the deal. We have free will. And this, you know, people have debated over this thing in Christian circles. There's two camps called the Calvinists, which believes that everything is there is no free will and it's all been preordained and we're sort of automatons, and yet we've been elected and we walk through this thing. And the Armenians, you know, say that you know, we are the responsible for making all the choices. Well, it's somewhere in between. Both are right in my opinion, in some sense. Here's what I think. Prophecy is, again, it's someone in the space shuttle. It's El Elyon in the space shuttle viewing not only the cornfield, right, but beyond the cornfield, into the next town, into the next city, into the next state. He can see everything. And so when El Elyon, the Most High God, tells us something like this, and this is sort of a mind blower, but we know, look, it is, but we know now from quantum physics and Einsteinian relativity that if we reach the speed of light, time would no longer exist. Okay?
Right.
We know that.
Yep.
Okay? So if that's true, in El Elyon, what does it say in the guidebook of the supernatural? It says Yahweh is light. Yahweh is light, beyond time and space as we know it. So the future to him, and this is really hard for us as finite beings to get our minds around. Going back to Stephen Hawking again, you know, trying to say that the universe just could have happened without any outside force. Well, thanks, Steve. Glad you figured that out for us. Really appreciate it. You know, finite mind trying to figure out the infinite just doesn't work. It's like my dog trying to read the encyclopedia. It's just it's absurdity. The bottom line is this, that he sees what's already happened. And that's what he's reporting back. It's already happened to him. He's already there. It's already happened. He's already come back and kicked everybody's butt. It's already done. From his point of view, it's already been done. From our point of view, we're in the cornfield. We're walking one step at a time through the corn patch. That's what we see. From his point of view in the space shuttle, it's already done. He knows exactly where all this is going to wind up and how everyone will, but it's still free will. And that's what's amazing. See, it's like you would say, well, he knows what's going to happen. Yeah, but you're still making free will choices. Huh?
Right. So
yeah,
now
absolutely.
everybody listening knows what's going to happen. So you could make those changes, right?
Make the changes, guys. You know what? It'd be great if we all could, but there's just too many forces that don't want that, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I hear that, and too many powerful forces at that.
Yeah.
Before we close it out tonight, would you mind telling us one of your best abduction interviews?
Well, let me see here. Let me try to just think for a second. I'll give you a recent one. This guy,
okay.
I spoke to him on Sunday, and I'm actually going to print the transcript out of my monthly news mag. If you want to check out any of this stuff, go to my website, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. We also have a television show we're producing called Watchers TV. If you go to my blog, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, or the website, lamarzulli.net, there are links to the trailer to Watchers TV talking about UFOs. It's going to be great. Be about an hour long presentation, and we're taking pre-orders, and they're starting to sell really well because we go where a lot of people have not gone before.
Right.
So that's just a little bit about how to get the information if you want to. You can see it from that. But I was talking to this gentleman on Sunday, and he talked about, and this is, see, before I tell you the story, there's a group of people that believe that all this is illusion. That it's not really real. You're not taken anywhere. Well, this guy's driving down the road, okay, in Canada, in his car. Classic abduction. Flash a light, loses consciousness. He finds himself 80 miles or 50 miles away. He wakes up 2 hours later. He's in the wrong direction, 50 miles away. He wakes up driving the car. He has no idea where he is. And then he realizes he's 50 miles off from where he should be. That's missing time. That's abduction.
All the recipes for abduction, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So with our last few minutes, if there's anything you want to get out there, a website, books, or so on,
sure.
Please feel free to go ahead and do that.
I know you're on the East Coast, but I will be speaking in Loveland, Colorado, September 25th, which is a Saturday, for 4 hours at the Rialto Theater. If you go to my website, or actually go to my blog, that's where it's listed, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, wordpress.com, lamarzulli@wordpress.com. And you can scroll down and link to the website, which will show you where I'm speaking. It's the Rialto Theater, September 25th. I'm the only speaker. I go for 4 hours. The PowerPoint has about 190 slides into it. It's very intense. We'll be talking about everything from politics, prophecy, the supernatural, UFOs, cattle mutilations, human mutilations, implants, prophecy, Ezekiel 38, the current political climate, movies like Knowing, Race to Which Mountain, V. Of course, my new TV program called Watchers TV will be talking about that, what we're trying to do with that program. So I will be in Loveland, Colorado, September 25th. On October 24th, I'll be in Nashville. Actually, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. I'm sorry. And the 24th, I'll be in Nashville, Tennessee. Again, go to the blog site, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, for information there. It's not posted yet, but it will be. So, I'm sort of busy. Lots of conferences, lots of speaking, and it's if you hear this and you're interested, it's easy to get me there. You just fly me in. You rent out a room or something, or get a bunch of people who are like-minded in this and want to hear more. I'll come for a love offering. That means whatever you can pay me. take up an offering, take up a collection, and I'll come and speak. Fly me in, put me up in a cheap hotel, and I'll go for 2 days and download tons of information and show you how it's all connected. And that's what I do. I do this full time. I watch full time. This is my position. This is my post. It's a lonely post, but it's one that I embrace and I love because it's I've got a lot of insight to what's going on, and I think I've connected some dots, and it's vital information in the days in which we live. Vital information.
Oh, I agree with you, L.A., and I want to let you know that I will have your website link up on my past guest page after the show, and if you have any other links, appearances, or what have you that you'd like me to get up, just send them to me in my email, and I'd be glad to put them up for you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. That's great.
I appreciate you being a guest here. I really do. It's been very educational and interesting 2 hours for sure, and I thank you so much.
Well, there's no false prophecy. They're never wrong. Never wrong. So you've got a disparity between the two camps. On one side of the aisle, you've got these ancient texts, which prophetic writings, which are 100% accurate. On the other side of the aisle, Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Boston Goodchild, the Hopi Indians, and the Mayan prophecies, to name a few. You've got some of these prophecies which are true. Many don't come to pass and are actually proven to be false. I'll give you one.
Okay.
Edgar Casey talked about Atlantis rising, and he gave a date. Well, that hasn't happened. The date is long since gone. It's decades ago. Atlantis never did rise. So Edgar Casey was wrong just in that one prophecy. In some of the others, he was correct. Here's the deal. Here's what I've discovered, and this is all covered in the new book, which will be released next year, 2011. It's called The Cosmic Chess Match. There are different dimensions. We are stuck in the space-time continuum. For the purpose of this conversation, we will call this time-space continuum, which you and I live in, the first heaven. That's what we'll call it, okay? The second heaven is another dimension, okay? But before I get there, in the first heaven, and the analogy is the cornfield analogy because it's something we can get our heads around. We are standing in a cornfield. The corn is 8 feet tall, okay? We see the corn in front of us, the corn to the left of us, to the right, and to the rear. That's it. We don't see anything else. The corn towers over our head. That represents our view of time. We are stuck in the space-time continuum. What I mean by that is 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. We are stuck. We watch time slowly tick by a second at a time. We are standing in the cornfield. We see none of the future. We see none. We know what the past is, but we absolutely have no view of the future. Nothing at all. Okay. Now, this is the first heaven. You dwell in the second heaven. Time and space is different. And the cornfield analogy, which is a way to, take it down in layman's terms, a way we all can understand it. Somebody comes in a shiny red fire truck with a 2-story extension ladder into the cornfield, right next to you.
Right.
Powers up that extension ladder. It's up 40 feet in the air. Someone climbs up to the top. Guess what? They can see not only where you're standing in the cornfield, they can see to the edge of the cornfield and the cornfield beyond that. So their view of time isn't infinite. It's still finite, but it sees further than we do in the time-space continuum. They're not the second heaven, which is represented by the fire truck, has a different perspective of time. This is why those beings in the second heaven get some things right, but not all things right. Now we've got the third heaven, and the being, which I will call El Elyon, which is the Hebrew for Most High God, is in the space shuttle with a telephoto lens. Guess what? He sees not only the cornfield and the cornfield beyond that, he sees as far as he wants. He's worshipped these ancient aliens as gods. Now they are back at this critical juncture in human history to act as our saviors, to usher us into this new age of enlightenment. Well, that's Von Daniken's side of the aisle. I completely disagree with all of that. I think what we're looking at is more of this cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, which the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about. Basically, we're talking fallen angels. These are very, very powerful beings, incredibly powerful beings. And when they came here, they created the civilizations as in antiquity, like Baalbek, perhaps Machu Picchu, perhaps the Great Pyramid, Gilgal-Raphaim in modern Israel is still intact. All these megalithic structures throughout the planet. They downloaded knowledge that mankind did not have. Ever wonder how the Mayan calendar just, sprang into existence? Here's a group of people that didn't know the wheel. All of a sudden, they have this amazing calendar. Well, here's the hypothesis, and there's only two: ancient alien, fallen angel. If fallen angel manifests and downloads this information, shows them how to do it, which is what I believe happened. All of a sudden, these people have this very complex calendar, which we didn't really get till the modern era. I mean, the Julian calendar, thousands of years ago, we got the 365-day thing, but we were off. The Mayan calendar is correct, and it's 1,000 years before we, in the modern era, corrected the Julian calendar to match it. Where did this information come from? And that just opens up a whole, Pandora's box of questions. Is it ancient aliens or is it fallen angels? I hold to the fallen angel theory only because I've got all this just a vast array of information in ancient texts which talk about the unthinkable. These beings manifesting on the planet, these fallen angels coming down on Earth, manifesting on the planet, having sex with women, the offspring, the hybrid, the chimera is called a Nephilim. It's half angel, half human. And this is the reason for the flood of Noah. By the way, before we get into the flood thing, if you want to get into that, all cultures, pretty much all cultures worldwide, have a flood mythos. Every single one of them, including the Chumash Indians in California.
Okay. Now, you mentioned events to come. What kind of events would we be talking about, and what does this have to do with the alien interviews, say, through prophecy?
Well, look, stuff is happening on the planet, and I guess if you work an 8-hour day and you come home and you drink a couple of beers and kick back and look at the tube and go about life that way and get all your news, or what news you do get is from the mainstream media, you're clueless. On the other hand, if you know what the prophecy says and you read these ancient texts and we begin to compare them to what is happening on the global scene, what is happening in real time right now, it is alarming. I'll just give you some examples. Eyjafjallajökull volcano blows in Iceland, shuts down the airspace for a week. Billions of dollars are lost. BP oil spill, may have stalled the Gulf current. 6 million fish, aquatic life washing up, just dead in the Bolivian rivers. That hit the news for about 2 or 3 days, blackout. This week, millions of fish die off in a river in Louisiana. Oil spill related? Who knows? Earthquakes, 7.2, 6.8, 6.5, 8.8 from January to the present day, almost on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I've said it myself that I have never in my life remember hearing these many these large earthquakes like this in such a short period of time.
Exactly. And the whole point is it business as usual, or is it something more? Famines. Niger, over almost 17% of the population faces starvation and malnutrition. Floods. China. Pakistan. The greatest flood in the whole history of Pakistan. You don't hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. They don't talk about it. They're in it. Haiti, the earthquake that killed 200,000 people. 200,000 people killed in the Haitian earthquake. You don't hear about that anymore. They're still picking up the aftermath. There's no infrastructure in Haiti. Nothing has changed. The place is a dead zone. Nothing is working in Haiti. Aid is trickling in, but the place is a disaster area. Do you understand what's going on here? The earthquakes continue. Russia, 500 to 600 fires burning throughout all of Russia. The greatest drought that they've had in 1,000 years, and they've kept records. It's the greatest drought in 1,000 years in Russia. I mean, is it business as usual or something more?
And I might add that you don't hear about all this on the news either.
No, you don't hear anything about this. When those fires were raging in Russia, the fires burned through the area known as Chernobyl, where the Chernobyl reactor was that leaked all the radiation, which is completely contaminated, okay? It's a ghost town. I've seen pictures. It's a ghost town. It's creepy to look at, Chernobyl. Well, when the fires came through, now we've got radioactive material burning and being ejected into the atmosphere. The Eyjafjallajökull volcano, going back to that in Iceland, there's a twin volcano called Katla. And usually these two volcanoes blow in tandem. Historically, that's what's happened. Eyjafjallajökull blows, Katla blows shortly thereafter. Volcanologists estimate that if Katla blows, the ash cloud will be at least, I'm being conservative here, 10 times greater than the Eyjafjallajökull volcano. Are we looking at a nuclear winter? If the Gulf Stream has failed because of the Gulf oil spill, which many people are starting to look at and wondering whether if the Gulf Stream has stopped, it's stalled out. It's happened before. Mini ice age. California, the coldest summer on record since 1914. You know, if we took one of those things by itself, you'd shrug it off. But you look at the whole picture, some of the things that I talked about, the earthquakes, the floods, the famines, the tsunamis, the fires, just the volcanic stuff, and then the signs in the heavens, comets, unidentified flying objects all over the globe, crop circles, cattle mutilations, implants, all this stuff together. Then you look at the war, the coming war in the Middle East, and we realize that something's going to blow there. Wars and rumors of wars. All this was prophesied specifically 2,000 years ago. When you see these things, what things? Wars, rumors, and wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. You will know that it's the beginning of sorrows. That's the prophecy. Are we there? In my opinion, I'm only one guy, but I've never seen the atmosphere charged like this ever, with just catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe. Week after week, we see these things manifest. In my humble opinion, we are in that time. We're not in the tribulation yet, the 7 years that ancient prophetic text talks about, but we are leading up to it, and it's very alarming.
It is very alarming. I mean, you've seen since 2010 began, you've seen nothing in the news but earthquakes here and volcanoes erupting there and floods, and I mean, it really opens your eyes if you're paying attention. Now, you talked about the BP oil, and for a moment I'd like to touch on that. In the Hopi prophecy, there's a part where it mentions man touching the sea and the sea turning black. Do you think that they were talking maybe about that, about oil?
Okay, here's the deal. The new book I'm working on is called The Cosmic Chess Match. It took me a year of research to pin down some of these different prophecies. And I didn't understand. And let me back things up. There are many prophecies: Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Blossom Goodchild, the Modern Prophet, Hopi Indians, Mayans. Okay, so sometimes they're right, but oftentimes they're wrong. In other words, with Nostradamus, they boast his accuracy at 60%. Edgar Casey Foundation, 60 to 70%. Okay, Hopi Indians, perhaps a little less than that. Mayans, who knows? Blossom Goodchild, who knows? But the point is, they're not 100% accurate. So I looked at this, and I was wondering, I was saying to myself, how is it that they get some stuff right, but a lot of the stuff is totally wrong? Whereas the ancient prophecies that I hold to are 100% accurate 100% of the time.
Zulli is the best-selling author of the Nephilim trilogy. He received an honorary doctorate for his work on the Nephilim. His latest nonfiction book, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, The Coming Great Deception of the Luciferian Endgame, may connect some dots other authors have overlooked. He possesses an in-depth knowledge of the UFOs and other supernatural phenomena. So everybody, please welcome with me tonight, L.A. Marzulli. Good evening.
Good evening. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It is our pleasure, definitely. Interesting topic tonight. I guess we could start out. You can tell us a little bit about your books and where everybody can get them, and throw your website out there.
Well, the best place is the website, lamarzulli.net. lamarzulli.net. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on the website, and that's the best place to check it out. I also blog 6 days a week at lamarzulli.wordpress.com.
Okay, great. So tell me, L.A., how did you get started in the whole alien topic and biblical prophecy?
Well, about 20 years ago, around that time, a friend of mine asked me a question. He said, what about life on other planets? And I had no answer for him. So I went down to the bookstore and I picked up a book called The Omega Conspiracy by Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. And that really serves as the primer for me. That opened up all sorts of vistas, untapped areas I had never studied before. For instance, the Book of Enoch. Dr. Thomas drew from the Book of Enoch and other ancient texts that most people have never read. The Book of Enoch is interesting because it's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's quoted in the Christian Bible in the Book of Jude, 2 Peter, 1 Corinthians alludes to it. So it was widely read in the first century. Again, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Ethiopian Bible has the Book of Enoch preceding Genesis in their copy. So it was widely read in antiquity, and it's a mind blower because it talks about the fallen angels coming to Earth and having sex with the women. And this opens up the whole idea of fallen angels, Nephilim, versus ancient aliens. In fact, I was just on the History Channel a couple of weeks back. They did they're filming the second season for the Ancient Aliens. And they filmed me for about 2 hours, specifically on the Book of Enoch, and talking about my worldview, my paradigm, what I believe, sort of looking at that, and then what they're going to do is obviously take Eric von Daniken and the ancient alien hypothesis. In other words, that simply is this, that extraterrestrials created all life on this planet, they genetically manipulated early man, started the world's earliest civilizations, created the world's religions as we know them. Our ancestors